A pleasant good afternoon to all our viewers and listeners. I am your host, Dr. Kellen Bubb, and I've been asked to host this afternoon's series of public education campaigns that's been put on by the Office of Diaspora Affairs on issues related to COVID-19. As we know, the COVID-19 pandemic has really affected Grenada significantly in the last quarter, really. And we're all trying to find ways to make sense of the impacts of that particular deadly communicable disease. And what we want to do today is to really have an important conversation with respect to natural remedies in COVID-19 and herbal medicines, vaccines, and lifestyle changes. The reason we want to have that conversation is because we believe it's important that we understand what works, what doesn't work, what makes sense, what doesn't make sense. How can we go about ensuring that we can do what is best for us as we attempt to ameliorate the negative consequences of this deadly virus. And joining me today, we have Dr. Wendy Parrott, who is a lifestyle medicine OBGYN, Dr. Guido Marcel. He is a pharmacologist, a pharmacognosist, who is into medicinal plant research, and Dr. Kellen Belfrin, who has a PhD, and his research, his line of work is in computational chemistry and biotech research. And what I want to do is to give each of these people an opportunity just to introduce themselves, talk about their work, and talk about their work in the context of how we can make sense of COVID-19. So ladies first, Dr. Parrott, I will begin with you.
Okay, my name is Wendy Perot, and I have Grenadian roots, so I'm very pleased to be here. I do lifestyle medicine and women's health, or OBGYN, and I got involved in lifestyle medicine over the last maybe 3 to 5 years thereabout. I've always liked this kind of medicine, and I got involved with it over the last 3 to 5 years, but I've always practiced that and integrated within my women's health office. So I do lifestyle medicine because I think it's the wave of the future. It's cost saving, and especially now with COVID-19, where everyone is concerned about immune boosting and immune health and prevention. I think this lifestyle medicine has a major place in this new era of the pandemic.
And Dr. Marcel, you're not new to this rodeo in terms of your pharmacognostic work. So, and I know that you're also a farmer, and I see that in your background you do have a photo of the late great Theophilus Albert Marichaux, and we want to take this time to wish Dr. T.A. Marichaux a happy birthday, and thank him for the work that he's done for Grenada and for the Caribbean in terms of integration. So, Dr. Marcel, over to you. Just unmute the mic, sir.
Thank you very much, and good afternoon to everyone, wherever you are. Well, my discipline is essentially pharmacognosy. Lots of time people ask me to explain it. Essentially, the concept is we are interested in herbs or herbal type material, interested in their quality, their efficacy, their safety, and their consistency. And even now, we are looking at being a little more climate smart, in the sense we are also adding to pharmacognosy, looking at it in an ecnopharmac. So we are now adding the term ecnopharmacognosy, so that we look at plants in a way that will save them, okay? And we look at plants, even when we are doing the research, we use minimum material. we use recyclable material. So we are getting kind of eco-smart when you're doing research and as regards looking at the environment, because you would need plants to do work and to use as medicinal entities. But if we are losing them to climate change, then they no longer exist. And there is where Kellon would come in very handy, because he'll be doing some of the copying and projections. Yeah. But we must have some of the original materials, and we must know how to conserve, identify them, how to conserve them, maybe how to propagate, how to cultivate, how to analyze, and how to guarantee their quality and safety when they are used, or even when they are used for testing. Because even before you could use, we maybe sometime want to do the clinical studies or the trials. And we want to be sure that you are using the correct thing. And if we want to continue testing and using, we should be able to find it again. So technically, that's a nutshell.
Mm-hmm. And last but not least, Dr. Kellen Belfon, you tried to explain your expertise to me, and I'm still lost, but you were able to analogize it in the context of coding. So that made sense to me, but over to you, sir.
All right, hi everyone. Good afternoon. So I am a computational chemist, and so what that involves is that I use computers, so I write program codes to look at how drug molecules interact with different proteins in your body. So in my PhD, I did research on developing a new type of inhibitor for HIV protease, and towards the end, I spent time studying the spike protein. So the spike protein is what's in all of the vaccines in one form or the other, and trying to understand how that spike protein actually interact with a known receptor on your lung cells. So how does the coronavirus actually get into your lung cells? Is what I studied in my latter part of my PhD.
Excellent.
And so now I work for a biotech company, and I'm doing research on developing drugs that can treat pancreatic cancer.
That is important work. That is very important work. So thank you all. I think all of you are really doing important work, and we're glad to have you here. But I want to begin with Dr. Parrott. Now, you spoke a lot about lifestyle, right, and lifestyle changes and things like that. How does that really fit into the remit of COVID-19 when we're talking about how to manage disease around COVID-19?
Okay, very, very good question. Well, let me just kind of first define for people who haven't, before we went live, what lifestyle medicine is, and then I'll talk about that just to give a quick and a brief definition. Lifestyle medicine is a really distinct field of medicine that aimed at treating the cause of most of our modern diseases. And since most of our modern diseases are caused by changes in our lifestyle or abnormal lifestyle changes, then lifestyle changes is the primary mode of which we use. We use things like nutrition, and we really center on whole food, plant-based nutrition. We use physical activity, stress management, and emotional well-being, sleep, smoking cessation, and reducing risky substance behavior, positive psychology, and connectedness. So we try to. This is what we do with lifestyle medicine. So the question is, how could we use that to help people with COVID-19 or prevent them from getting disease or boosting immunity? And we know, and this is all evidence-based, and if someone wants to know the evidence for that, I have all kinds of emails I can send with every single bit of evidence supporting this, that the foods we eat, the diet that we choose, affects our immunity. So if we start with whole foods, plant, and now everyone could be a vegan, but you can be a vegan that's very unhealthy. So that's why I spell it out and I said whole food, plant-based nutrition. And that is eating mostly plants. And Dr. Marcel talked about saving the plant. And I was very happy to hear him say saving the plant, because when you eat a whole food plant-based, you're really saving the planet, really. Because the best line of defense for any illness including the viruses, it would affect our microbiome. And plant foods, especially those high in fiber, produce short chain fatty acids. And that short chain fatty acids that is produced by the large intestine play a pivotal role in preventions of pathogens and even improving our hormones and in changing our metabolic pathways and therefore improving our immune system. In other words, what we eat, especially if we eat a whole food plant-based, which is really low fat, can actually improve our immunity. And we know through evidence that vegetarians have been shown to have more effective white blood cells compared to non-vegetarians due to the high intake of their vitamins and low intake of fats. Limiting fats may also strengthen your defense as well. And research have shown that oils, just simply oils, impair our white blood cells. And it could impair their function, and this is our defense. It's also important to maintain a healthy weight. And we know the plant-based diet helps you to maintain a healthy weight. So a plant-based diet has also been shown to reduce inflammatory biomarkers. Studies have shown that fruits and vegetables provide nutrients like beta carotene and vitamin C and vitamin E that can boost your immune system. And because many fruits and vegetables and other plant-based foods are also rich in antioxidants, they also reduce oxidative stress as well. So there are a lot of, it's just from food, and I can go on and on and on talking about how food can improve your immunity. Food can also change your genes. It can turn bad genes off, turn good genes on. Immediately. Foods affect our endothelium. Immediate bite of food, the immediate meal that you eat can change things immediately. So we know that vitamin D, which we don't get much from our foods, but we get it mostly from sunlight, and research have shown that it improves immunity. And we know that supplementation with vitamin D helps with COVID-19. Zinc, which we get from our foods, we can get it from pumpkin seeds, sesame from seeds, and beans, and lentils. Gives you, the zinc. But you can also get it by supplementation too. And of course, adequate hydration. But let me talk also about sleep. Another modality that we use with our lifestyle changes. Sleep, we know by evidence that people who sleep less than 5 hours, per night, or who have been diagnosed with a sleep disorder, they get more colds. That's a documented research that has been shown. Another study found that a diet rich in fiber and low in saturated fat can lead to more deeper sleep. You want to go down into a deep sleep, stage 3 and 4 sleep, which gives you a slow wave sleep. And during the slow wave sleep, you produce interleukins 12, which is a inflammatory cytokine that actually presents the antigen presenting cell so that B cells can be made and you can get antibodies from that. So sleep is important. That occurs during restorative sleep, during the slow wave sleep, which is amongst about 25% of our sleep. So sleep is also important as well. Stress reduction. I can't say much more. So that's part of it. Stress reduction. We think positive thoughts. We rest, especially in nature, and we engage in service to others. So these are some of the things that we can do how lifestyle medicine and lifestyle changes to improve our immunity, especially in this era of this pandemic.
And Dr. Gardner Marcel, I will get to you here and to the question of there is a big refrain. And please, listeners, people who are watching this live, please don't hesitate to send in your questions and comments for the expert panel here. But Dr. Marcel, over to you with respect to the idea of building your immunity. You know, we hear this narrative a lot about building your immunity around this time, boosting your immunity, really, that's the terminology. That's not something that I go purchase a few packets of zinc or vitamin C or emergency at the pharmacy, that it gives me that immediate effect. Yes. So can you talk about just as an extension to what Dr. Parrott was saying with respect to what the process looks like in terms of building one's immunity over time?
Very interesting presentation, Dr. Parrott. I want to do a little switch or add a little thing to Dr. Parrott. I want us to look at ourselves, our bodies, as basically having an outer protection layer and an inner protection layer. So alimentary canal is really an inner protection layer, okay? So outer protection layer has to react with the environment on the outside to keep us healthy. And as Dr. Parrott said, you know, our skin, inner skin will produce vitamin D, which is very important for immune system, among other things. We also have in our skin, the folic acid interacting with sunlight, which is responsible for producing substances that would increase our sexuality. Actually, they give rise to healthy sperms and healthy eggs. And actually, it's the continuation of the generation, technically through your skin. So that's the outer portion. And then on top of that, we should also say that our skin protects us from sunlight and maybe the potential of getting cancer. The which Brother Kellon will come on later. Yes, okay. But let us look on the inside now. We have an alimentary canal. And in there, as Dr. Parrott said, we have a wonderful microbiome. These organisms, you know, mainly, and there are as many as 37 trillion that occupies that vicinity or that area at a time, okay? And what are they doing, you know? They are like, what must I say, watchmen or watch people, controlling the activity of things that move from our gut, the food we eat, so back to the food we eat, how do you break it down? How do you get maximum nutrients from it to pass it into your blood system, and also to prevent the things that might be problematic, the toxins from going in, and then you produce the substances that are in communication with our brain and other things like that. So it's a wonderful set of activities going on there. So our immune system technically start off from our birth, from our birth. That's where it starts, you know. As a matter of fact, recent research has shown that when a woman or mother is 9 months pregnant, there is actually a microorganism that moves from the gut to the breast, so that when she starts to breastfeed, it actually goes directly to the child. I mean, recent research has shown that. So that is how important, you know, and our continued lifestyle, you know, helps us to enhance and build our immune system. Let us look at Grenada casually. You remember, you know, growing up, the way we used to eat, all right? Our fruits, our vegetables, our greens. Granted, people must be used to say sometimes, you know, as children, we didn't all the time care about washing our hands and you know, when we go to the countryside and things like that. But research is actually showing that that was an integral part of building our immune system. We were maximizing and randomizing the quantity of microorganisms that we were getting here. So in other words, we ended up with a large variety, a large population. One of the ways this is immediately seen sometimes is that when we have maybe a young person visiting from a foreign state coming from Europe, and you find they're exposed to a water situation, even a mosquito bite, you see they tend to develop certain problematic situations. This is because they were never engendered with some of the things that we were engendered with. Another good example of the starting of the immune system too is the comparison between natural birth and cesarean birth. It is evidence that with natural birth, there is a maximization of the microorganism that starts to pass to the child. And during cesarean birth, some of the children never get certain things from their mother. So that's where it starts. And then we continue with maybe our feeding habits. You know, the food we eat, we speak about the probiotics and the prebiotics, feeding the microorganisms in the gut so that they could do the work, because some of the things we eat that are rich in fibers, the beans, the greens, the legumes and things like that, our enzymes cannot break them down. But the microorganisms in the gut can do that work, or they do that work for us, so we can get the benefits from the thing they do, along with the other substances that they produce. So that is where it goes, without giving calling specific food names or plant names and things like that. And on top of that too, you could enhance it by maybe having certain teas or certain beverages, that are natural source. So your fruits, your vegetables, your nuts, your seeds, etc.
Yeah, and that is, yes, please proceed, Dr. Marcel. Did you want to say something else?
No, you can go ahead. We'll always branch.
Yes, and Dr. Belfon, I would get to you. Now, you say that your line of research has to do with computational chemistry, and you say that you write code to understand how drugs interact with proteins in the human body. Now, we have been seeing in this period a rush to embrace certain pharmaceutical remedies over other pharmaceutical remedies, a rush to embrace a particular prophylactic type treatments, yes, to minimize the impact of the COVID infection on the body. Some suggested that perhaps some of these drugs can actually prevent the onset or prevent the severity of the disease when it happens. Now, tell us, when you think about, or when you're reflecting on just the idea of using drugs and certain medicines for COVID, what are your thoughts on how we should proceed with deciding on what best course of action to take?
Yeah, no, I think that's it's a good question, Kelon. But along that line is based on scientific research, right? So a lot of cases, like for example, take remdesivir, for example, that was one of the big ones that was used for treating COVID, but it was a drug that had been developed for something else, right? One aspect of looking at these kind of drugs is clinical trials, right? Actually having scientific based evidence that shows and prove that that particular drug can actually have an impact. Unfortunately, but probably fortunately, in the case of COVID, there was a lot of trials that was done at hospitals, in a sense. I put trials in quotation because they're not, backed by science, in a sense. It was just like doctors trying to make the best of a bad situation. And so they had results that came out that showed that some of these drugs are effective. And then other hospitals have a different opinion when those same drugs are used, right? So that's where the complexity gets involved. And that's why it's important to have clinical trials in those cases.
And you make a good point there about the clinical trials. So let us talk about drugs like remdesivir. I believe a lot of countries in the developing world have employed that as a therapy. What kind of research went into making the determination that remdesivir would be a good treatment for COVID?
Well, it's in terms of the mechanism of how remdesivir actually works, right? So it is in a simple form, is a drug that goes in and pretty much stop any virus from producing proteins that's necessary for the virus to replicate, for it to go ahead and infect other cells. But in terms of like the toxicity, like what dose you should use for a particular viral infection, those things varies based on the particular virus that's infected individual. But remdesivir has been used to treat malaria, as I can remember. So it's the same mechanism, right, in terms of that aspect. So, yeah.
Okay, and I would get to another conversation that has been coming up relative to COVID-19 in Grenada and certainly in other developing countries, and that has to do with the use of drugs that really did not go through certain robust clinical trials. Yes, and so you have some people who are touting these miracle drugs, as evidence because and they will say, well, based on that small subset of the population, this is what the efficacy looks like, right? So I want to have everyone engage with this. I'm going to start with you, Dr. Perrott. What are your thoughts on how we should interpret the science in that way? I think science communication can also be very complicated for the layman. So how do we interpret, for example, we might hear a particular story on the news, or somebody might send something for us on WhatsApp or Facebook or other social media platform where they are honing in on that one particular thing, as opposed to looking at the full big picture.
Well, I just kind of a little biased. If there isn't any randomized clinical trials, if there
Yeah.
not any randomized clinical trials, I'm like scratching my head wondering, is it really true?
Mhm.
You see, I got to see a randomized clinical trial for me to believe it. And that's just my science brain and that's doing that. So some of these drugs, like may I call ivermectin, etc. And I've seen some of it and it's iffy. Yes, it's good. Yes, it's bad. We're not sure. You could or could not. It's so, but if there's a good randomized clinical trial, I believe it.
Okay, Dr. Marcel?
Very interestingly now, is that even when we want to speak about the benefits and the value of foods, we are beginning to look at them in a way that you look at drugs. You want to kind of test them and also do the randomized studies. Because if you want to promote a food, that is the way you also want to approach it. So you want to do it for medicine, you want to do it for foods, you want to do it for herbal preparations and things like that. The problem is we have to face it. On planet Earth, there are there might be billions of people who will never be able to come into contact with maybe doctors or even studies, but they have to survive. They have to live. And in their environment, and they have been doing some things that they have gotten some benefits from. So sometimes we have to accept maybe some of the things that they are doing. In some cases, we may not fully understand, or we have not yet found out the science relating to what they are doing. But I mean, somebody that is living 500, 1,000 miles, from the first doctor or the first hospital, and they're having childbirth and they're having things like that, we have to be realistic in the world, So when we are speaking, and I think we are speaking about the world, let us say the tribes in the Amazon basin, certain area, yes, yes. I don't think we should be too presumptuous as to say that we could advise them as to maybe all what they could do. In some cases, we have to maybe sit back and listen and accept, because sometimes we are actually bringing in the diseases to them and confusing them. So that is another way of looking at it. So it's not comparing wrong or right. But again, too, sometimes we have to analyze the situation and the circumstances and say maybe what is the maximum benefit. And sometimes the maximum is not 100%. Yeah? It might just be 60. Yeah. Right? And that may be the beneficial modality. Yes.
Just
yes, go ahead.
Well, just after what Dr. Marcel is saying, right? There are times too where a particular treatment, right? It might be herbal medicine in that case, or type of food that can work for a particular type of a population. right? And then we tend to see those studies, and it may not work for other part of that population, right? So like what might work in the Amazon, for example, may not work for someone that's living in America, right? And those are things that we need to be a little bit cautious about. And one of the points that you made earlier on, both Dr. Marcel and Dr. Parrott had made that point about your microbiome, right? So the good bacteria and the bad bacteria that lives in your gut, those are also influenced by whatever you intake as well, right? So
That's correct.
Whatever drug you take or whatever herbal remedy you take will be different. The outcome will be different based on where you are.
That's I want to add something here. That's very correct. There was a recent study I read about African American men and they compared them to African men in Africa. You know, eating two different kinds of foods. You eat in Western diet, and they're eating high fiber food. And what they did was they took African American men and they gave them the African diet. And notice literally after 21 days, their microbiome have changed just from the change in the diet. So you're taking, and I always say, if you take Caribbean people and put them in Alberta, Canada, that's why you get so much of strange diseases, because we came with our own sense of our own microbiome, and we've been placed there, and you got to eat this Western food that we never accustomed eating back home. And then we get diseases because we just, or genetics couldn't, you know, it does not understand, basically. And we end up getting diseases.
Okay, Kellogg,
yes, go ahead, Dr. Marcel, go ahead.
I have a hypothesis to that.
Yes.
And I guess if the others have observed it and other people have observed it, because I always think, like when our folks, let's say Grenadians, return home on vacation, what seems to be their tendency? What do they want to eat? What do they want to eat? They start looking back for, they want to get maybe some oil dung, some breadfruit. This is the kind of thing, some fig and salt fish. In the kind of way, I'm just hypothesizing, but I think it goes back to maybe I'm going to Kellogg, maybe it's the encapsulation or the coding or genetic coding for what our system know of what used to be our microbiome. So when we come back home, that is what we search for. This is a casual observation. I don't think any study has been done as such, but it's an area that people could follow back on, isn't it? And to Dr. Parrott, is it one of attitude that you come back and that attitude is built in? Yeah, it is there unknowingly.
Yes. Yes.
That attitudinal push.
But I do like the idea of the microbiome, because we're beginning to study it more and more now, and realizing that it plays a significant role in our general health. I mean, there's so many things, even emotional health, even our emotional health.
When you say emotional health, are you referencing mental health here?
Yes,
or is just...
yes, I'm referring to mental health with most of the serotonin, most of our neurotransmitters that our brain uses are produced in the gut. And even our hormones for women, estrogen and all of that stuff, yes, we have ovaries that produce that, but somehow the gut is able to, we have special microbiome for estrogen. In other words, the foods we eat that has estrogen, like soy and whatever, we have a special microbiome for that.
Let's see. I think
again,
Go ahead.
For example, I'll ask you here, why is it, and maybe to Dr. Parrott too, like when we cook an oil dung, it is more like a social thing. You wouldn't cook an oil dung for you alone, for one person to eat. How come, what is the nexus of that kind of social behavior?
Well, I think
food itself, is it part of a micro?
I'm glad you brought that up. You've heard about the Mediterranean diet, right?
Yes, I think part
of the Mediterranean diet is that where they never eat alone. They eat with people. It's mindful eating. So you eat with people, and it really improves your digestion, and improves your health, and improves everything. Eating with people.
And we have a question here from the chat. Dr. Marcel, could you comment, would you know that we have over 400 years of trial? This is from a commenter, done on our people for our herbal remedies. Much of these have been validated by scientific research available on the US government and other authoritative websites. Can you comment on that, Dr. Marcel? You need to unmute, sir.
Some countries have gone ahead because, you know, like the European Commission have a set of plans that we know have listed for certain purposes. In the US, you have grass. Plants are classified as generally regarded as safe, okay? But we also have to be mindful. Okay, these were traditional things, but let us say, we have become sophisticated in our equipment and testing things. For example, we know our grandparents used to say that you fall and you do damage your skin or your muscle in your skin and thing, and we're going to give you a massage, we're going to rub it and things like that. And you know that usually it healed. Now we are at the point where you could actually test that maybe the ointment or the oils or the combination of essential oils you're using, you could actually show how they penetrate the skin and get to the muscle and the work they are doing, okay? So you see, as the science advances, it helps us to get a better understanding and explanation of what is happening. A lot of the time, let us take a simple one, like what, let's say some of the elderly people used to do. I'm going to give us like a simple example. We used to put clothes on grass to bleach, okay? Not knowing the science, but it's traditional and you know the clothes get white. But now we could tell you that plants produce oxygen, and the oxygen by an oxidative process is working just like Clorox because it is bleaching the clothes. You see? So although there is that large body of information, we have to be also apply some of the contemporary equipment, the contemporary knowledge, like what Kellen is doing to verify, you know, and to add to the, I think that we are not condemning, but we are building on the knowledge base. That 400 years or 1,000 years of knowledge that they had, and which was kind of oral, because remember, we didn't do much documentation. Now we need to move into the documentation and putting it into the right channels. So it's not, I would never say that they were wrong, but the explanations have improved and increased so we could get a better understanding as we apply. And also, we are at the point to where we are multidisciplinary. So even in a simple thing like a herbal preparation and things like that, you would like the input from the chemists, the botanists, the pharmacologists, the naturalists, or because you want to see it as a holistic thing. Yeah,
that's correct.
We're seeing you as
Whole
a
person.
person, as a total.
Full person. Yes.
And in your environment.
Multidisciplinary, yes.
Multidisciplinary.
Yeah.
Mixed methods research, if you will. But Dr. Belford, let me get to you here. You come from a pharmaceutical place, right?
Right.
There is always that tension between Western medicine, which is grounded in sort of pharmaceutical medicine, and then there is the African tradition. Historically, when the term bush doctor, people think bush doctor is some term of art for witchcraft. It is not, right? Bush doctor was that African healer that the slaves consulted with. So how do you think that, as to Dr. Marcel's point, that there can be a middle ground between what you do in sort of Western medicine, contemporary medicine, modern medicine, and what has been touted as some of these at-home and herbal remedies, and how do we ensure that we have efficacy if we're able to do that?
So I will say this, right? I will start off by saying that we need to come to a point in time where they are not divided, right? We tend to think about it as two separate entities. So herbal medicine is on another side and pharmaceutical drugs on a different side, and they don't coincide. But in reality, they intersect a lot, right? There's an intersect. When you think about it, most of the pharmaceutical drugs that's on the market, right, have some kind of parent molecule or part of that compound that probably came from a plant or came from a microorganism. So they're not separated in terms of that realm, right? One of the issue with taking herbal medicine, and that's one thing we have to look at, is toxicity and side effects, right? And that's why you need to do the studies, right? You need to do the research to find out exactly what the right dose that you need to treat a particular disease. Because whenever you take a herbal medication, right, there are multiple compounds in that herb, right? And those compounds might bind to a specific protein, right, that you needed to bind to, that you needed to attach to, and it carries a particular purpose. And that's great. But you also have compounds in that same plant that will bind to other places, attach to other proteins in your cell that will cause detrimental effect. And that's what we call side effects, right? It can also damage like your liver, for example, if you don't know what the right dosage is. So this is why we need to do a study. So one of the things is with compounds that come from plants, they bind well, they attach to the protein well, but then that's where we can come in and we can optimize that interaction and make it more potent so it only binds to a specific protein. So you don't have that strong side effect. And that's one of the importance of it. So they are not separated. And I think we need to get beyond that idea of thinking about those two things as being separated when they are not, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay,
Right.
Kellan, I'll add a little piece here.
Yeah.
Actually, in some African countries, they now have the practice where they bring the herbal practitioner or traditional medicine to the hospital, and he gives his preparation to the patient, and both of them observe the patient. The contemporary doctor and the herbalist observe the patient to see that you are getting whatever transformation or healing that, and they're doing the documentation. This is also very evident in Ayurvedic medicine in India. All right, and I had the opportunity to travel there, and I went to an Ayurvedic hospital. I spoke with Ayurvedic doctors, and I also went to the factory where they produce Ayurvedic medicine, which is it is very traditional, you see. But this is a system of medicine that they have had going down for years and years and years, you know, and they pass on the tradition. So they are trained in those particular dispensations. And also the Chinese herbal medicine or their traditional medicine here, where you could go to a pharmacy and half of the pharmacy may be traditional things and the other half is contemporary things. So in some parts of the world, you know, they have come to terms with that kind of thing. Certain other countries, on the other hand, I don't know, maybe because of the influence, the strong influence of some of the pharmaceutical industries here, certain things seem to get totally out of balance, and it seemed to be pivoted too much to one side. As a casual observation.
And Dr. Parrott, your thoughts on this idea?
Yeah, I do agree with Dr. Marcel. I think that there is a place for herbal medicine, what I call alternative medicine, not the conventional, because you know conventional medicine is really the highest goal is to give some medication that is prescribed, that is pharmaceutical grade and something surgical. But alternative medicine, I think there's a place for it. I think there's a place for Ayurvedic medicine. I think there's a place for even Chinese medicine. I'm very open to all of that. Actually, I'm probably one of the few people who are open to that. There is a concern, as Dr. Balfon had said, that we sometimes don't always know the dosage, we don't always know the potency, etc. But some of these things are studied, and we know. Let's take, for instance, the Ayurvedic herb ashwagandha, for instance. Dr. Marcel probably knows that one, and you know it's used for stress, etc. It's used for hormonal balance. And I use it actually. I shouldn't say prescribe, but I tell my patients, listen, go to the health food store and get this, and use it. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
So yes, so I think there is a place for that, and some of them have been studied. Yeah, some of them have been. Not all.
Right, and that's an important point you make about using things that are battle tested, right?
Yes.
And as opposed to just, and Dr. Marcel, you made a point in a previous platform about just picking bush and just drinking bush and
Yes.
just boiling some black sage and all will be well, right?
But we have to be,
And that's not something you have to be, what, in other words, you have to be more systematic with respect to how you approach even using herbs.
yes. Because remember, I also say that we have to be careful about the safety of the product we are starting with, even though there are plant material like leaves or so, okay? But we have to make sure that it's not contaminated, maybe by pesticide or the use of some other extraneous material. When we are buying it from people too, we have to make sure that it's not adulterated. For example, I personally know of cases where people maybe, I'll give you the thing, our famous Boabande, Chiona venosa, which is a scientific name here. I know of people who are selling it, but they extract it with alcohol first and then sell the extracted material so that it could no longer be valuable. Some people do the same thing with cinnamon. You know, they extract it and then they dry it and sell it, totally adulterated, totally transformed. You see, so when you think you get it and you want to use it and you say, well, but it had no effect. I didn't see any benefits, but you didn't get what it was supposed to be. So those are some of the tricks in the trade too, you know, that we must become mindful of, you know, that there that we know, especially so, and that's where come into that. So getting seriously maybe into herbal preparation and thing, it must be mindful that you should be responsible maybe for, to a certain extent, for the sourcing or the cultivation of the product. Not only that too, there's a phenomenon in plants where the time you harvest and when you harvest seem to dictate the quality and the quantity of active ingredients. For example, most of the basils, the ocimums, you know, if you let them flower, they're no longer as tasty, as potent. The phytochemistry actually changes when they flower. So you should really harvest them before they flower. Certain things are higher in phytochemistry early in the morning. By evening, yes, they no longer have a lot of the active ingredients. So one has to be mindful of that to a certain extent. So somebody would have told you, I used this and I got benefits. Very well so. But what you use is not what they use. And sometimes one has to be very careful in that regard. But I think it's a total, as I said, we have to be holistic. We have to be very mindful. We have to also take the teachings from our grandparents, you know, because some of them, they were very careful. Let me give you one of this. Your grandparents used to say, do not go and harvest teas for making tea for children at night after 6. And their simple explanation was, the plant is asleep. The plant is asleep. But when you look at it scientifically, basically, they were being highly mathematical, you know. What they were saying, in the tropics in particular, at around 6 o'clock, it started getting dark and dusty. You send out a child to get leaves at that time. The child realized that the plant was there 12 o'clock, but they're running outside to come back to grandmother. I thought I saw it there. So I picked some leaves and bring back in the dark. You see, so your grandmother did that? Yes, yes. No, go out when it's light, so you make sure that you're getting what you are getting, okay? And also, then maybe they didn't know that constituents seemed to be highest at the time. Another story I could tell you is I know there's this grandmother who sent the children in particular to collect kojo root, which is Petiveria alacea. It's a very popular plant. It is now showing potential to help with prostate cancer in men, work done in Jamaica. It is also a plant that helps the immune system, but it's also a plant with high spirituality. Throughout the Caribbean, people see it as a highly spiritual plant. It's a plant that gives you, with African culture, it gives you protection, okay? For the Shango beyond the. But this grandmother, when she sent out the children to get kosher root, if in harvesting it, they bust a little piece of root, don't bring it for me. Come back with the entire root. I send you to collect kojo root. You see, so there were these, you know, teachings where they were kind of guaranteeing technically some sort of dosage in an unscientific, scientific way. Your guiding kind of is the roots I want in my son or my grandchild. Yeah, don't bring that part for me. So just some of the stories that you have seen and heard. Yes.
Dr. Marcella, I trust that you are that piece of knowledge that you're sharing there with us has been published. Has it been? I hope that that's a because this is fascinating, right? We always talk about parents and bush medicine. I'm sure Dr. Parrott, you probably heard the same thing. Dr.
I heard the same thing.
But I don't know if you.
Absolutely familiar.
Yeah. No. Let's get into.
Let's let me share another one.
Marcel.
Let's let me share another one with you. Our grandparents, give them that. You remember what they did sometimes? They say use maybe odd numbers of leaves. So use 5 leaves, 7 or 9, and for 9 mornings. So in a way, they try to set up a kind of dosage system, The contemporary doctor would say, he's writing a full prescription, use this drug twice a day for 7 days and come back to me after 7 days.
Right. Well, we got to understand, even now there's an area of medicine called circadian medicine. Yes. Circadian medicine. And actually what they were doing, they didn't even know what they were doing, but they were actually getting in contact with their circadian rhythm.
Yes.
I tell my patients, for instance, go out in the morning sunlight. In the morning sunlight, for instance, you have to sync your body with the sun, the 24-hour cycle of the sun. That gives you more estrogen, actually. It improves your estrogen. If you sync your body with the sun, helps you to sleep better that night. So this whole syncing the circadian rhythm thing, the 7 nights or 7 days, there was something to it, I believe.
Yeah, no, and I think, but this brings me to a very important point here, and that is how do we transfer that to successive generations when what we are witnessing in Grenada and in other developing countries, again, the principle of development also connotes that we tend to go much more Western, right? Dr. Parrott, you spoke about Western diets, but we see this Westernization of Caribbean diets, which again, the evidence tells us that because of that Westernization of diet, you're having instances where we are developing these particular lifestyle diseases and comorbidities that have not been around. For example, during even in my parents' generation and in my grandparents' generation, I mean, we look at issues of life expectancy now, right? And what that looks like now. And we look at what, the line in KFC would be much longer than the throngs of people who would be going up in the country to perhaps get some fig and blugger from Dr. Marcel's land. I don't know if he does have fig and blugger there, but you get what I'm saying. So Dr. Belfort, I want to press you here. How can we, maintain that harmony while also embracing some aspects of Western medicine, which would be good for us?
No, I definitely think that's a difficult question. Like it's something that I don't know. I don't have any thoughts on that.
Okay, and that's all right. Let's go to Dr. Marcel and Dr. Parrott.
Yeah. Wow, that's it. It is a tough question, but and it's actually something I deal with literally every day, because the Westernized diet, you know what it is, and we see more KFC and more Americanization of the Caribbean and lines at KFC as well, and that is a problem, because that's the Western diet, and that is what we know is causing all of these abnormal lifestyle, changes and lifestyle diseases, non-communicable diseases. We have to change that. And I was hoping that this whole COVID pandemic thing would be a wake-up call for us to actually take stock of our life and take stock of our lifestyle. Listen, it's free. Lifestyle is free. I mean, eating the proper diet is free, and I think we know what it is. You know, as Dr. Marcel says, when people come home, what do they want to eat? What do they want to eat? Because they remember the food that they eat before. And so if we have to really make an important decision to eat more plants. Eat plants. Eat plants. You know, there was one food writer who said, eat plants, not too much, you know, when you eat it, you know. But let's make sure that your entire, diet be one with plants, you know, whole food and plant-based.
Dr. Marcel?
So Dr. Kellen, Dr. Belfon, when you get your graduate students, I want you to get them to do projects of comparison. So they're going to be analyzing our foods and compare it with the American foods and tell us exactly what they are. So then we can, you see, because that, I think, is one of the things is lack of information. We don't get the information as to what is in those things, you know? So it looks like, because I have the concept, you cannot call anything a poor food. I mean, in the attitudinal sense. I mean, if it is poor nutritionally, yes, but you cannot say it's a poor person food and things. Food doesn't carry that characteristic with it. It doesn't carry that characteristic with it at all. So tell me what the nutrients are on both sides so we could compare. And I think that is some of the work we need to do. I think, you see, sometimes when we send our people to train, sometimes they get mopped up and we don't get back the benefits of the contemporary knowledge that they have developed. So we can use it at home, you know, to enhance our knowledge and say, yes, we've been doing the right thing. For example, look at our grandparents give us that meal, something like, let's say, sulfur sauce, which has in the tomato and the cucumber and the lettuce and a little bit of coconut oil, with the proteins and things like that. Isn't that balanced? Because you get your fibers so you could feed your you get your amino acids, and you get your fibers so you could feed your microbiome and things. Isn't that a wonderful meal that they have handed down to us? Yes. And at Christmas time they have given us ginger and sorrel, both highly beneficial drinks. Okay, sorrel rich in antioxidant, ginger anti-inflammatory and anti-nausea. Yeah, they have handed these things down to us, and now we have to be in a position to analyze and say, you know, Dr. Callan, that this is what these things are. Thank you for giving us, but we would now tell you, because of the training, this is a richness and the value of what you have given us, of handed down to us.
Right. No,
go ahead.
No, just, you know, I definitely agree with that. And that's the whole idea I'm talking about, like how everything can intersect together, right? So like understanding what we know, like from our ancestors, grandparents, parents as well too, and using that knowledge and actually understanding the science behind it and educating the population on the science behind it as well. And I think like that's one of the good things that we can do moving forward in terms of that.
Yeah, and Dr. Belfon, let us switch gears a little bit here to talk about RNA and mRNA technology, and perhaps the difference really in the two, because I think that there is that's another talking point and conversation that has really saturated the Grenadian population, that the technology that is used in the COVID-19 vaccine is new and untested, and that should serve as a justification for why you should not take the vaccine. Well, I'm not going to take the vaccine because of this new technology that they use. Can you really just give us a Cliff Notes a version, if you will, of what mRNA technology is in the context of the vaccines that have been rolled out to reduce the severity of symptoms with respect to COVID-19?
Right. So
okay, Brother Bob, just before you go into this, Kalon, since your specialty was the spike protein, I want him to deal with this and then come to that. But because what does the spike protein mean? Because a lot of people, maybe our listeners, don't understand the significance of the spike protein and its interaction with getting into the thing. And then we move on to your question. So because his
Yes.
specialty is working on that spike.
Right. Right. Yeah. Let's start from there, right? So
Yeah.
coronavirus, right, has a name corona based on these spike proteins that is on the surface of the virus, right? And those spike protein has that main purpose. The main purpose of that protein is to attach to a receptor that's on our lung cells. That receptor is called ACE2, right? Whenever the spike protein attaches to the receptor, it then allows the entire virus to enter our cells, and the virus releases its inner core, right? So like its RNA into our body, and our body then produces proteins based on the RNA from that virus. And those proteins that our body produces also is called the same spike protein that then get moved into the cells surface. So on the lung cells now, we have these spike protein that's on our surface, and our body see that as there's something wrong, right? So that's when our immune system kicks in, start attacking our own lung cells, and it can get really bad in that case, right? So there's two aspects of the response. There's killing the virus itself, but also killing your cells that have spike protein on it, right? So that's in terms of that aspect. In terms of the mRNA vaccine, you mentioned the word new, right? And I want to ensure that if anything people get out of what I say today is that in science, things are not necessarily new, because science is compounded knowledge, right? It's built upon. So mRNA vaccine technology has started from the 1980s, right? That idea has been around from when the HIV, the AIDS pandemic actually started off, right? So there was a lot of trial and error that came along that line to the point where we have success today. So it's not new in a sense. It's new in terms of we are using it for the first time for a vaccine that is blowing up in the media, because you know how the media like to put things out there to have people having that conversation, which is great, but it's not new in that sense. And what the mRNA and the spike protein is in terms of relation, the mRNA is an instruction that is given to your body to produce the spike protein, right? So the mRNA technology is just a mRNA, right, is encapsulated in a lipid, so fatty cells. And the reason why it's encapsulated in a lipid is so it can get into your cells itself. Once it gets into your cell, the lipids get broken down. The mRNA is read by your cells, and it produces a spike protein. The spike protein then moves to the surface of your cell, and then your body sees it and it says, okay, this doesn't look right. These cells don't look right. So I'm going to produce antibodies against that particular cell. But it's going to produce it not at a high level, not at a crazy level when you actually get the virus, but it's going to remember. So next time it sees the spike protein in the future, when you get a coronavirus infection, it knows what to do, right? So that's the key aspect of it. And if you think about the other vaccines like AstraZeneca or J&J, they pretty much, the technology is not that different in a sense. Like they use a viral vector, adenovirus from chimpanzee, right? And in that case, they have a DNA that's encapsulated in adenovirus. That DNA is then transcribed into mRNA, the same mRNA that's in Pfizer or Moderna vaccine, right? And then that produces the same spike protein that then goes onto your cell and there's the same response. So they're not really that different in terms of how we explain it and how we break it down and separate it, because we love to separate things in our population. We love to separate stuff so we can try to understand and put one against each other, but they are not really different in terms of the outcome, right? Just the difference here is how they get into the cell, right? That's the only difference between both of them.
Okay. Thank you for that. Did anyone else want to add, Dr. Marcel?
One addition, there's and why maybe, as Kellon is saying, from the mechanism of the vaccine and how it works, why it become crucial in initiating antibodies. If we were to leave our body to do its own initiation, it needs maybe, is it 14 to 20 days to do its own initiation? So what in that time, what do you want to happen? In that time, what is happening? That virus is multiplying, is multiplying. So that is why basically the vaccine is giving you a kickstart, to shorten that period. And that is how people, I think, that is how it is explained, and that is how people should see it. And don't take away the thing like they are giving you, people are talking about they are adding things that would damage your DNA or the secret code and 666 and other things like that, you know, yeah, or they are trying to kill you and the things. There are a lot of misinformation, and we must face it. It is easy to promulgate misinformation. Yeah. But as science, as we are on this evening, you know, it's another thing. Because we are trained as scientists, we think a certain way. Yes, yes. We look for evidence, you know, we look for support, and then we wouldn't, newspaper articles and things wouldn't be the most important thing for us. You would go to something like Google Scholar. You want peer-reviewed papers.
That's right. That's right. Yes.
That's not important. That's not important in our world. So thank you.
Dr. Parrott?
Yes.
Dr. Belfon, you wanted to add something, and I'll get to Dr. Parrott.
No, I just wanted to add about
our audience question.
Yeah, I just want to add about a peer review, because a lot of times people like bring forth information, right, that is not peer reviewed, right? But it's done by scientists. It's done by scientists.
Yes.
So like you got to be a little bit cautious. So the peer review is very important in that aspect.
Right. Yeah, and that is important, Dr. Parrott.
Yes.
Is there anything else you wanted to add to this mix?
Well, I agree with what the other researchers were saying, that Dr. Balfon and Dr. Marcel, about, you know, peer review and about being very careful with the information that we get. People get a lot of information from everywhere. You know, I get all kinds of, you know, all kinds of stuff from every single thing, saying everything bad about the, you know, everything bad about the vaccine. I mean, I get it all the time. You know, people, you know, send stuff to me. Read this, read that. But to me, the messages are so clear. And Dr. Kellen was pretty good at explaining it. That, you know, the things that we know. You know, this is not a new thing. We have been doing this for a while, and now we have the opportunity to use it as a vaccine.
And that's a very important point you all make here about just how we it's a challenge, really. How do you correct that misinformation, that constant barrage of misinformation, which is not similar to just the process of publishing, right? Your research, your research publications go through several iterations, several peer reviews, several revisions before it becomes a published item.
Yes.
So that is a frustration that I think we have to acknowledge. But we have a question from the chat here. Can the panelists discuss the efficacy of some of the alternative strategies for combating COVID specifically? For individuals, what might be the best strategies for prevention and treatment? Who wants to go with that? Dr. Marcel, Dr. Marcel, you're trying to speak, but you're unmuted.
Yes.
Yeah, go ahead.
But I want to go back a little bit, okay? Is this entire situation absolutely new to Grenada? We have to ask a question. And let us ask the question, why did we have a quarantine station? Quarantine point, okay? How did we handle tuberculosis? Yeah, we got in the 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s. Tuberculosis was prevalent in Grenada and in the Caribbean, you know. And it was eventually the PCG vaccine that was able to eradicate it, okay? Smallpox, okay? Measles. So the phenomena itself is not absolutely new. So how did we deal with it, okay? When sailors were coming in with, let's say, smallpox, we isolated them in quarantine station. We had a way of dealing with it, okay? Yeah. So a lot of people think that, again, saying that this thing is absolutely new. The whole phenomena is not absolutely new. But again, we have become a little contemporary. As to the use of alternatives, there would always, I think there would always be a rule, because again, COVID shows some symptoms that are similar to cold and things like that, okay? So congestion in your respiratory system, the coughing, the sneezing and things like that. There are some plant material, like the spices and things like that, that would help alleviate these, okay? So your symptoms, apparent symptoms could be alleviated, but you haven't gotten to the core or the causation of the disease, okay? But you may have been relieved, okay? So there are certain plants that would do that, you know? You could make your garlic is one that would help with that. Ginger would help. Turmeric to a certain extent would help. And these have been listed. We see it in the Ayurvedic medicine. And we also see it, a lot of work has been done in Brazil because they carry some of the similar type of plants we have, okay? And a very interesting point, as I was doing some of the studies for this thing, I think like making a tea from what we call thyme. You know the thyme we cook with? Small
Yes.
thyme, Thymus vulgaris.
Yes.
Yes. It's one of the things used for making cough syrup because it has a potent substance called thymol, okay? But if you're making a tea from it to use for the cold, it is advised that you do not give it to children under 2.5-year-old. Why? Because it tends to maybe work too good and it encourages laryngitis in the children. It actually affects the larynx, you know, instead of behaving as a cough or something, yeah? So you see, I'm just saying that sometimes you have to get the examples, you see, and the specifics, yes, to make the decision, you know? And sometimes it means going through a lot of information. And there are sources of information, as Dr. Pratt would say, but for the region, for people who are interested in this kind of thing, work is being done at the University of the West Indies in Jamaica and in Barbados. There is also an association, which I'm a member, called TRAMIL. And you could Google it, Traditional Medicine in Latin America and the Caribbean. And they have produced a pharmacopoeia in which we have about 100 and something plants that are used throughout the English, French, and Spanish-speaking countries in the region. Yeah. And you could put in the name of a plant and it would give you how is it used in Mexico, how is it used and things like that. So you could boost your information. Plus, there's a lot of work being done in Brazil on some of the similar plants that we have. They've been doing a lot of work on soursop leaf, for example, and things like that. So indeed, there could be alternative uses, but it's a very interesting that if I quote from I'll actually quote from a publication which says, and I'll read, while these herbal medicines will not cure or prevent the flu or COVID, they may improve general patterns of well-being, okay? They may improve general patterns of well-being, but they, in most cases, for most of research, they are not a substantive cure. And this is something I think we must realize and try to deal with it. Not putting people aside or putting down anybody, but we must realize that there could be these type of problems and we must face it. We must be realistic. Okay?
Yeah, just to add on to this, right? I very much agree with Dr. Marcel is saying here. Because you can also think about like herbal remedies as the difference between a drug and a vaccine, right? Normally you would take a drug when you're actually sick. A vaccine prevents you from getting sick or increases your chance of not getting sick, right? And then there's that detailed difference is important. Like I like to use analogies a lot, and a good way to think about it, if you have to make a choice and someone wants to say, I will give you a blue pill or a red pill, you have to take one. But the one you take, if you take the wrong one, you're gonna die. If you take the other one, you're gonna live, right? And I give you a third option. I say take an orange pill, and you don't have to take the option of taking a red or a blue pill. Which choice will you take? Will you go take the risk and try to take a red or blue pill and die, or will you take the orange pill and not take the choice at all? So you have to think about it in terms of that as well, because the vaccine gives you the ability, the opportunity to not get infected at all, right?
Opportunity. Okay.
Dr.
So
Perret?
I want to add a few things here. You hear about supplements that people take, and I want to say, I recommend supplements to my patients in limited form because I always feel that you can get it from your foods. But I tell them what supplements is. Supplement is used to supplement something that you don't have now. And so there's a point A and a point B of which you need to start it and get off of that. Using your lifestyle and foods to carry forth what you're doing. But in this era of the pandemic, I have recommended a little bit of supplement, two of which I know that there are studies on, and that is vitamin D. Now, in the Caribbean, we have a lot of sunshine, but we also have, our skin is darker, and therefore we need a little bit extra vitamin D than the average. So, but we do get enough because we're in the sun all the time. If you're in the sun in the morning and your shadow is longer than your height is longer than the shadow is longer than your height, you're not getting vitamin D. You need to get vitamin D at the hottest part of the day, usually around between 10 and 3. And you need 3 times a day for about half an hour. But if you can't be in the sun, you need about 5,000 IU. This is recommended. This vitamin D has been studied for COVID-19. And we use vitamin D in our intensive care. We give patients vitamin D. Now, we throw everything at these patients when we didn't know. They're on a vent, we'll do vitamin D, we do everything that we can. We give them vitamin C, 1,000 milligrams. So in an intensive care, we give them vitamin C, 1,000 milligrams, vitamin D. I'm laughing all day long because in the past, my good old friends who are intensivists, they didn't believe me. Now I'm laughing at, oh, you're giving my patients supplements now in intensive care. So 1,000 milligrams of vitamin C, 5,000 international units of vitamin D is sufficient. Zinc, 50 milligrams can also be used as well. You can get these things over the counter. Quercetin. Now, quercetin is what is found in garlic and onions. The same thing that Dr. Marcel was talking about, but making a tea using garlic or making a drink or a tonic using garlic, you can get it quercetin. Now, NAC, which means N-acetylcysteine. Now, both vitamin D and N-acetylcysteine has been studied. N-acetylcysteine, about 600 milligrams twice a day, can be used. And I say if like nurses who are working in an environment where they see COVID patients all the time, I recommend that sort of cocktail for them. And melatonin, 3 milligrams. We give our patients all of that in intensive care. But I want to say something, that the whole is greater than the sum of its parts, meaning if you can get this stuff in foods, if you get it in your food, somehow the other new phytonutrients in food makes this much more absorbable. Yes, you get it absorbed from a capsule, but somehow the other new phytonutrients in food makes these things more absorbable. So the sum is greater than the whole of its parts. And I want to say 2 other modalities that nobody touches on. One is called forest bathing. Now, what is forest bathing? Forest bathing, and we have that in the Caribbean. Forest bathing is when you go out among trees, among nature, it increases your T killer cells. And that has been documented and proven over and over. The Japanese have proven this. They'll send people out in the forest for a couple hours. And you know what? It accumulates. You need it every 7 days. By the way, you hold that whole cycle of 7, you need it every 7 days. But the forest bathing,
such a fascinating thing. I never knew that. So perhaps our nenen and parents who would go to the mountain and pick nutmegs and pick cocoa and so on, that is something that they did. Right?
Yes, it's forest bathing, and it increases your T killer cells, which is important for preventing replication. And it actually, the T killer cell kills infected cells, cells that are infected. And then there's one last thing, and that's hydrotherapy. Now, I'm using that because if you go back in 1918, when we had the Spanish flu, they were, of course, there wasn't any antibiotics, there wasn't any vaccines, there wasn't nothing. And a lot of people died. But it was a group of people who used hydrotherapy. And apparently their death rate was significantly less. So what is hydrotherapy? How could we use this? It's actually water, hot and cold water, because hot water increases your immunity, and the cold water keeps it there. So if you actually do an alternating hot and cold bath, once you begin to feel as if you're getting this thing, it improves your innate immune system. And of course, we have two sets of immune systems. You have an innate immune system and you have an adaptive immune system. The innate immune system is the one that we're actually born with, really developed by about age 3. Mm-hmm. That's why kids get so much fevers, because once your innate immune system is affected, it produces something called interferon, and interferon interferes with viruses' replication. So when you do the hot and cold, you increases and makes the interferon much more effective. So those are some of the natural things that we can do.
Right. I want to add,
yes.
Yeah, and I want to add a few things here. On the vitamin D thing, I remember looking at a nice research that did mention that vitamin D inhibits IL-6. IL-6 is the levels they actually look at when you have like a cytokine storm.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, so it does have that good aspect, but there's something else I want to add on the interferon spot, because there have been a research that have shown that certain individuals have a deficiency in producing enough interferons. So that results in antibody production being a lot later, right? So that's other things that we have to look at in terms of like using like vitamin D or vitamin C or any of the treatments, because it may work for most people, but it may not work for all people.
It doesn't.
Yeah, so you just got to be cautious about
that. Caveats, right?
That's so Brother Cullen.
Yes.
So
you want to engage
here for us in Grenada, we must really, what must I say, celebrate the freshness of the air we breathe. And we know that it's transformed because the Northeast Trades is continuously blowing. So we are getting a totally replenished supply of oxygen continuously. And this is something that we play scant courtesy to. Most lay people think that you're just there, you're alive, and you just have the air. But I remember we don't have any factories, so we do not, any massifiers, so we don't contaminate. Also, there are some observations I made from over the COVID period. I don't know if I could speak about it. One of the things I've observed is that there seemed to have been, without rigorous research, but there seemed to have been an increase in sea bathing over the COVID period with the lockdown. Interestingly, there was an increase in the drinking of coconut water. A lot of people were going for coconut water. And then, of course, we saw people, trying to do some backyard gardening and going back into slow foods. We saw people preparing their foods at home and using some of those are some of the things that we, at least that I'm reporting that I actually saw. It is not rigorous research, but from a number of people.
But I think it's important participant observation. It is important field research methods, if you will, right?
Yes.
And there can be some correlation there.
Yes.
With respect to other, I suppose, homeopathic.
Yes.
Would homeopathic prescriptions be correct? Again, I'm way out of my league here. But it's important. It's important that we look at all of these elements as to form a mosaic, right, of how we can make sense of this pandemic for people. So what we want to do now is yes,
Dr. Parrott, I noticed, maybe you were leaving the best for last. Yes. I haven't heard you mention water.
Well, yeah, yes, water is very important. It's quite important, and as I probably should have said that along with when I was talking about hydrotherapy. But yes. Yes, water. We need to drink as much water as we can. We came up with 8 glasses of water, but if you really eat a fully whole food, plant-based nutrition, where most of your plants has a whole lot of water in it.
Yes.
You really just need only 5 glasses of water. This is what this is what is being recommended
Yeah.
if you eat completely whole food plant-based nutrition.
And what we are finding too, around this time, there seem to be, again, this is actually some of it is as mentioned, there seem to have been a thermal or temperature rise in the region and in Grenada. So people are feeling the humidity has increased, it's much hotter. We haven't yet documented whether it is causing people to become sick, heat strokes and things like that. We haven't seen that yet. But that has, I think, have engendered the drinking of more water is something that I think that has happened, maybe for the better. And I guess we would have to look at people working in the field. They might have to be encouraged, because it is getting hotter, to actually use more, make sure that they have their water and things to use.
And staying hydrated. Yeah. So we want to get
hydration.
We want to get to some closing comments. Dr. Belfon, I will start with you. Then I would go to Dr. Marcel and then Dr. Parrott.
So I feel like the panel today gave a lot of good options. There's a lot of good opinions, a lot of factual stuff that was spoken. I want to say one thing. I'm not like pushing anyone to get a vaccine in any kind of way, right? This is not my intention being on this panel, but I would like to just push along the line of it is a good form of prevention, right? And then taking anything, whether it be herbal remedy, and there are drugs that's coming out right now. Merck have a drug that's going to be coming out to treat COVID. So it's going to be a different world in the next few months. But what I'm trying to say is that if you can prevent something from happening, then I would say to do that first. Don't wait for a disease to happen and then try to treat it, not knowing what your genetic makeup is, because your genetic makeup might be different. And treatment that might work for me may not work for you, right? COVID I might get infected and I may not have any symptoms. I may not have any issues, but you may have a serious issue. So why wait to get to that point? Get vaccinated.
Yeah. Dr. Marcel?
Yes, I like the point that Kellen made. Although we are collective, we are a group, we are society, but also we are strong individuals. And in that individuality, we have differences. And in lots of times, we must try to identify maybe the causes of our problems and treat it to suit. This is it. Sometimes your problem is not, although it may on the surface look symptomatically the same, but it's not identical to that of your patient. And I think that is one of the areas that we should give a little more concentration to person. And the decision could be yours. And I keep reiterating that in anything you are using, even be it your food, your medicine, or your herbal preparations, be concerned about the quality, the efficacy, and the safety for all of them. Thank you.
Okay, Dr. Parrott?
Yes, I also recommend vaccination, but I also recommend living a clean and healthy lifestyle. Do the best we can. Your body is a whole, treat it well, eat more plants, sleep well, hydrate, love more, move more. Let's do the best we can.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for agreeing to appear on this diaspora panel. As a reminder to our viewers and listeners, on November 21st, the next diaspora expert panel will be on the 21st of November, which will be on media and COVID-19. And the sessions will continue to run bi-weekly from today's session. So once again, I am your moderator, Dr. Kellen Bubb. Please share this program with your friends, family, relatives, colleagues, and peers, because some very important information was shared here, which I think we can all benefit from. So on behalf of the team that coordinated this, thank you again, and everyone have a safe, very safe, and healthy week ahead. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.